experience on that sore tongue, that would not be a good experience, but I learned that in a hurry.
Salty tomato juice on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it seems like you guys did a lot of labor-intensive manual kind of food storing and canning and preparation back in those days. So what are all the things that you guys either butchered or canned or collected? Everything, right?
No, everything. We hardly ever went to a grocery store. And if we did, once in a great while, we'd go and get maybe a loaf of bread. And we always thought that was a treat to buy store-bought bread. But we hardly ever bought anything at the grocery store. It was always stuff that we canned or stuff that we grow on the farm. I know one of the things that my mother used to do would be go out and pick wild greens, like dandelion greens. I guess that's what they were. But she'd pick these wild greens and she'd make what we call wild salad. And sometimes that would be all we'd have for supper, would be the greens that she had picked out in the field. You know, she'd go out there, and I can still see her coming back over the field, and she usually would hold her apron, you know, make a basket in her apron, and she'd pick that stuff and put it in her apron, and she'd come back across the field with her apron full of these greens, and she'd bring them in, clean them, and cook them down with usually some bacon grease or something like that, and that would be supper. But we always canned a lot. We made our own cider and used that to make apple butter, which was also an all-day experience. We had a 30-gallon copper kettle. Well, we didn't have one, but we'd always borrow one from somebody, and we'd usually, it took about 45 gallons of cider, and we'd boil the cider down, and then we'd cut apples and peel apples and throw them in. But boiling apple butter was an all-day job, but we usually end up with probably 20 gallons of apple butter that we would have for the winter.
Canned in quart jars.
Canned in quart jars. Sometimes we put it in a gallon crock, and then just, that would be, it would sort of form its own seal over the top of it, and that's the way we'd keep it, you know, but mostly it was in jars.
And did those apple butter days take place in the fall?
Yeah.
Apple harvest time?
Always in the fall. That was always something you'd do in the fall. And that was the same way with Butcher Day. You couldn't butcher when it was warm because the meat wouldn't keep, so we'd always have to butcher when it was usually around between Thanksgiving and Christmas. We'd butcher anywhere 3 to 5 pigs, and we'd butcher them and grind up our own sausage and make our own lard. We'd probably end up with 4 or 5 5-gallon or 4-gallon cans of lard we would use. That would be, we'd have that for the whole year. And we'd put the meat, lay it out on boards up in the grain house most of the time. Then we would make up a preservative out of Morton sugar cure and salt. And then we'd go out and lay the meat with the skin side down, and then we'd cover all the rest of it with this Morton sugar cure, and it would leave it lay there. It'd lay there all winter, but when it started to get warm in the spring, then we'd go out, and if we hadn't eaten it, then we'd put it in sacks and hang it up, keep the flies off of it. But it might hang there till the middle of the summer. And you know, if my mother was getting ready to cook a meal and she needed to have a ham, she'd say, well, go out and bring me in one of those hams or a shoulder. And we'd bring it in the house, and she'd start to slice it. And when she took out what she wanted, she just put the rest of it back in the closet there. And we didn't have a refrigerator. She just put it there. And when the next meal come along, she'd slice out some more. And you know, and it might be 2 or 3 weeks we'd be slicing on that one piece of meat. And it never was refrigerated, you know. Of course, we had the sugar cure on it to preserve it, but we didn't think about getting sick then, you know. We just...
And you didn't really get sick, did you?
No.
Right.
No.
And chickens you probably always ate fresh, right?
Oh yeah. if we were having company for dinner, Mom would say, "Go catch me a chicken and chop its head off," you know. So I've done that lots and lots of times. Go out. You'd always call them and find out which ones were laying and which ones weren't laying. You know, you could tell them when you held the chicken up by its legs and felt the bones. You could tell if they were far apart or if they were not far apart. If they were too far apart where the egg came out, you'd know she was. If they were close together, you'd know that was not a laying hen. Okay.
Hello? Hey, what's that?
We did not have that kind of experience.
I don't know.
Because my dad ran our 5 and dime store for his brother, and that's what brought us to the Plainville area to begin with. And
Okay, just a second.
he had run some in a couple of other places too, like in Akron, Ohio. We lived there for a short time, and a couple of different times in Ohio when he had gone over there to open a new store for my uncle. And then he would make trips into to New York to buy things for the 5 and dime store. He'd buy goods there, and he'd buy for several stores. And some of it went to the one that he was running, and some went to other ones that were someplace else. And finally, they opened one in Plainville, and that's what brought us to Plainville. And he ran that store there for several years until they finally closed it. And I don't know exactly why, but I presume that it was because the bigger department stores were coming in, and so it was no longer profitable to run that particular store. And eventually, my uncle closed out all of his stores, and before he died, sometime before he died, and so then Dad had to find other work. And one of the things that he did was to work at Ingersoll Steel and Disc in Kalamazoo, and he worked there for a while. But when the war broke out, he had gone over to Willow Run and helped to build some of the big ships that they were building. And he started out because he didn't have any experience in that. He started out just sweeping the floors and doing odd jobs for them over there, and they gradually, as he showed that he was a good worker and knew something, could learn quickly about things, he gradually was put onto the actual building of the big boats, and that was quite an experience for him. So he'd be over there maybe 2 weeks at a time, and then he'd come home for a weekend, and then he'd go back over again. And he did that for a good year, maybe more than that. I'm not sure how long. But when he'd come home, he nearly always had a treat for us kids. And by that time, by 1943, my youngest brother was born in 43, there were 9 of us kids. So he couldn't bring a treat for everybody, but he would bring a treat for the family maybe. And he did that for quite a while. And then he began to sell fruits and vegetables from our home. And it was known all around there that they could come there and buy fruits and vegetables. And a lot of people would do that. They'd just come out and get potatoes, apples, tomatoes. We grew a few things, but that was mostly for our own use. We just had a vegetable garden and used those things. But we also could use the apples and potatoes, onions, all those kinds of things that he would go up to a warehouse in Grand Rapids and he'd buy that, bring them back. And if there were things that needed sorted, like potatoes, maybe he'd get some potatoes and some of them that have wet spots. So he'd have to clean out the rotten potatoes from there. He'd sort the potatoes and buy and sell. And so we didn't have a lot of money in those days, but we always seemed to get by all right. We did a lot of canning. Also, we canned peaches and fruits, all kinds of fruits and vegetables. And I can still remember us, all of our family, sitting around the table. And we each had our own pan of peaches or tomatoes or whatever it was. And Mom would keep the jars washed up for us. And And then each of us kids had our own pan of fruit or vegetable, whatever it was we were doing, and we'd fill the cans with peaches, and Mom would make the syrup and get them cooking. And I can remember when I thought that Mom had the easy job, because here we had to sit there and peel these peaches or tomatoes and fill the cans, and then all Mom had to do was can them. What I didn't realize was that if it was peaches, she was making the syrup and getting the jar lids on and putting them in the hot water and timing them, and she was on her feet a lot. And we all sat around the table and did our work. She was on her feet. Once in a while, she'd come back to the table when she was at a waiting point and sit down and help us peel. But we canned a lot of stuff. And then when freezers came around, and you could buy freezers, and we did some freezing, but not a lot. Most of it was canned. And
Hi.
so we were really pretty poor, but we always had electricity. We always had a telephone, kind of hung on the wall. And when we first moved to this house, it was a party phone, party line, and one party would have one ring, and another party would have two rings, and another would have three rings and four, like that. So you always had to listen to see how many rings it was, whether you were supposed to answer or not. Some people used to answer anyway, just to listen in on the conversation. Once it quit ringing, yeah, 'cause you'd hear a telephone click and you know somebody was listening in. And we were known to do that once in a while ourselves, until Mom would say, "All right, get off of that phone. That's not for you." But yeah.
Keep up with the neighbors that way.
Keep up with the neighbors. I was so glad when we went to a two-party line, because there were just two, and you knew if somebody was listening who it was. That was a big deal. And then when we actually had just one party, we had our own private line. That was pretty nice.
And that was one phone in the house,
Yes.
Attached to the
one
wall.
phone in the house, right. Attached to the wall.
by cord.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Now, that was a whole lot better than what we had, because we never had a telephone when I lived at home. They got telephones quite a while after I left home. We never had telephones. Of course, we didn't have electricity either until I was in 5th grade, so we didn't have to worry about some of those neighbors listening in and being nosy like that. I mentioned a little while ago about Butcher Day. That was always one of the exciting days for a kid. And I can remember when I was young, Butcher Days would always start early in the morning, because you always had to heat up three 30-gallon kettles full of water, because you needed water to scald the pigs in whenever you get ready to slaughter them. You'd usually shoot the pigs, and then you had to scald them so the hair could be removed, and then we'd hang them up, cut them out, butcher them, and when it come time for dinner, we always had fresh liver and sweetbreads. And if you don't know what sweetbreads are, those were the brains of the pigs.
So you always ate those the first day?
You always ate them on Butcher Day. And then the thing that the women always did after you had the pigs slaughtered and had their intestines out, was to take the small intestine and scrape it so it was clean, because we used that's casing to stuff the sausage, and we'd stuff the sausage in that intestine, and we put that in the lard press, and we had a special attachment on the lard press.
Yeah.
That we put that casing over it, and then we could just stuff it full of sausage, and we thought it was wonderful.
So the casing, those intestines are actually chitlins, right? You actually can eat those as chitlins?
No, the chitlins were what we got after when we pressed the lard. We cut up the fat pieces and boiled it up really good. And no, that's right. Those were cracklins. Yeah, the cracklins is what we got after we pressed the lard. We press all the lard out of it, and then you'd have these pieces of cracklins that we love to eat. And I'm sure they were loaded with cholesterol, but nobody knew about cholesterol back in those days.
They didn't have it back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, then the chitlins we'd use them for casings to put the stuff the sausage in. In later years, you were able to buy casings commercially, and I don't know what they were made out of, but I always remembered that we used our own intestines,
Your own
the
intestines.
pig's intestines.
Okay. Yeah.
Made your own casings.
Made your own casings, right?
Harvested the intestines of the pigs.
Yeah.
So Grandma, I missed part of that discussion about how you guys had some very enormous canning days back in
We did.
back in your childhood, and that was to feed 9
Yeah,
kids.
9 kids, and yeah, because my oldest brother was born in 1923, 10 years before me, and my youngest brother was born in 1940. So we were what, 17 years
Mhm.
and 9 kids, and it wasn't until the war broke out, my brother went into the Navy, and then that was the first time that there was less than, well, at least 8 people around the table. 8 to 10 with my parents. So, but part of the time, there were 11 of us there. And when my brother Billy was born. And,
He had enough for 2, right?
well, he started out pretty big. He weighed 13 pounds and 3 ounces. And
That's 2 normal babies.
that's 2 normal babies. And he grew pretty fast. And he's not a real heavy guy today. He's tall, but not real heavy. But that's what he weighed when he was born. Anyway, so there were most of the years that I think about, when I think back to my school years, there were a lot of us sitting around the table. I remember peeling a dishpan full of potatoes for potato soup for supper, and it took us a little while to get it all ready, but that was one of my favorite meals. And I would make potato soup, and we'd have a salad and canned peaches, and all the bread and butter we wanted to eat to go along with it.
Homemade bread?
No, not always. We usually had bought-in bread. Mom didn't do as much baking. We had better access, I think, and maybe more ready cash than Dad did at our house. So not that we had a lot of ready cash, but we were able to go and buy milk and bread, and that was the 2 big things that we bought, and butter, milk and bread and butter. That was pretty much it. And the rest of it, what we grew, and then what Dad bought for selling. And so he'd buy and sell, and then we used some of that too.
I think one of the other differences was, we always made the bread, but we also took our wheat and had it ground to make our own flour. And we always had our own milk, we always had our own meat. But I think probably Marian's mother and my mother both cleansed, at least would can 600 to 700 quarts of stuff every year.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's time to take a little break here. It's
Uh-huh.
prom day here in Portland, Oregon,
Oh, I see.
and Katrina's going to the prom at St. Mary's. Carson's going to the prom with his friend Lottie at St. Mary's. So preparations have begun. Got shirts to iron, corsage to pin on. And speaking of memories, there's a new memory. Last weekend, Danny and I left town to go up to British Columbia to watch Katrina's regatta. Grandma and Grandpa were here, and unbeknownst to them before they came out, but they had been made responsible for cooking dinner for 16 prom goers on Saturday night before the prom. So they pulled it off without a hitch, grilling steaks and chickens, making an enormous vat of mashed potatoes. Salad came in, and everyone agreed. It was great.
It was fun, yeah.
All right,
That was the first prom.
that was last weekend's prom at Lincoln High School. Now there's a new prom this weekend. All right, we'll be back again with the next episode of this show later on, perhaps tomorrow sometime, and we'll be talking to Vance and Marian a little bit more. Any final words?
No, that's all.
More to come.
All right.
Yeah. Did you have good success?